What's up, guys? It's Dan from Coin Bureau Trading. Today, we're going to take a look at why and how altcoins will pump. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell. Before we get started, do keep in mind that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's just my personal analysis of the crypto market. Your analysis could be different, and if it is, that's awesome, because the more difference of opinion that we have, the better traders and the better investors we're all going to become. So let's start with the why. The reason why basically altcoins will start to pump all starts with Bitcoin. So of course, some of you might have heard that Bitcoin recently hit $112,000. What's really interesting is that not many people are paying attention to Bitcoin yet, but I think that's going to change probably as a result of the Trump's spending bill being passed. That's probably going to cause a little bit of bond market volatility, some intervention by the Fed. Maybe it'll result in this narrative that like the current financial system is dead and like bond markets are dead, and you're going to see Bitcoin pumping in response to that. And as a result, you're going to see all these headlines and all these narratives saying, the traditional financial system is finally collapsing and everyone is rotating into Bitcoin and crypto, right? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but this is kind of like a foreseeable narrative, and arguably the narrative that's caused Bitcoin to pump this much even over the last couple of weeks is that people are seeing these debt downgrades and like government spending, and they're saying, I need something to protect my my wealth, and Bitcoin is emerging as a popular alternative. That's the narrative you're already seeing, and you're going to see it even more. And this is what's kind of going to bring a lot of attention into crypto. But of course, what's going to happen, and this is put very nicely by an ex-user here named Marusha. So I'll just read it out because it's entertaining and also very true. So let me understand. I put $1,000 into Bitcoin today. If Bitcoin goes to $212,000, I make $1,000. Yeah, okay, nobody will get rich. This is basically the impression that most retail investors will have, or I guess most crypto investors in general. When they start paying attention to crypto, they're gonna go to a website like CoinMarketCap. They're gonna start, of course, with Bitcoin, and they're gonna be looking at Bitcoin. And at that stage, who knows? Maybe it'll be like 120, 140,000, maybe even 200,000, and they'll be looking at Bitcoin and thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. Like, I don't really have a few $100,000 sitting around to invest into Bitcoin. Of course, a lot of people know that you can buy fractions of a Bitcoin. But the thing is, guys, that as a fun fact, the average investment into crypto, according to various reports that I've read, is somewhere around $500. And again, that average, this is an average. So that's like skewed by, I'm sure that there's a lot of people that invest like thousands, and then a lot of people that invest like, $50 or $100, and it averages out somewhere in the middle. So just do keep that in mind. But point being, average investment into crypto is around $500. So we have to look at the crypto market through the lens of someone who has $500 or maybe $1,000, and they're looking to see how can I make like a 5x or 10x return, or really like make life-changing amounts of money. They're going to look at Bitcoin and they're going to be like, there's no chance, right? Even if you're aware that, even if you see all these headlines saying Bitcoin's going to 1 million, and if Bitcoin is at around like 200,000, you might think like, okay, but if I put 500, I'll maybe 4x or 5x my money. That's not really going to help me. I need something with bigger returns. So of course they're going to look down at Ethereum. I think, and by that point, hopefully Ethereum's around $3,000, $4,000. But same idea. They're going to look at that. They're like, I don't know, maybe I can buy like half of an ETH. If I borrow money, maybe I can buy 1 ETH. But ETH hasn't done too well, and I heard that Solana's big competition, and it doesn't seem to be getting that much attention. The price tag is super high. I'm not really a fan. I remember in the last cycle, Ethereum fees were super high. And it wasn't really doing that great. Again, you have to look at the lens of the crypto market through someone that just has a few $100s and is looking to make a big return. Again, they're going to look at Bitcoin and say, I don't think I'm doing that. They're going to look at Ethereum and be like, I don't think I'm doing that. And of course, that's going to bring them down to XRP. So this is where things get interesting. And this is just my personal opinion. Feel free to disagree in the comments. I think the biggest hurdle in the case of something like XRP is that you have a lot of XRP holders that have been accumulating for years and years and years. They're finally in profit, and they're slowly going to be taking profits, especially as XRP's price starts to rise. So you could say that the ratio of, let's say, existing XRP investors versus new XRP investors is not as good as it is compared to some other crypto projects that haven't been around as long and don't have as many quote unquote bag holders, let's say. Again, feel free to disagree in the comments. I think that XRP is going to do great. I still think it's going to 2x, maybe even 3x. But the thing is that I do think a lot of people, again, there's just not going to be as many new retail investors coming into XRP, especially because there won't be that many catalysts that will put it in the spotlight. Yes, XRP could get an ETF. Yes, XRP is probably going to be announced as as part of a formal strategic altcoin reserve. But besides those two things, there isn't really anything that sticks out, anything that would really get XRP to be persistently in the headlines and attract a steady stream of new buyers, if that makes any sense. And again, I think XRP is going to do well. I think XRP's ecosystem is going to do amazing. But even just think about the average retail investor who's maybe heard about crypto, maybe heard about XRP. They're coming, to CoinMarketCap. They're looking at all this stuff, and they're saying, oh yeah, XRP, I remember that. Maybe they'll even click in on the chart here here, and they'll zoom out and they'll be looking like, wow, like this thing looks like it's pretty overbought here. I don't really want to be buying the top. It looks pretty interesting and blah, blah, blah. And like, all this connections to banks and whatever. But again, like it's not something that's necessarily going to be as appealing as, as other cryptos as they move down the list. Similar idea with BNB. I don't think it's going to catch a bid because, people will be like, BNB, like what's that? Besides the fact that they'll realize that it's not very easy to buy because it's not available on many US exchanges. They're going to be like, wow, like, oh, BNB belongs to Binance. Binance was in trouble with regulators. I remember that. I don't want to necessarily buy BNB, right? Like again, you're just thinking very surface level. BNB price tag, around $700. Maybe by that point it'll be close to 1,000. So you'll be looking at BNB price at 1,000 and being like, like I don't really want to buy that. I'd rather buy something like XRP, right? So forget about Bitcoin, forget about Ethereum, BNB, probably not. And then at Solana, that's where things get a little bit interesting. Maybe Solana's up around $200. So people might be looking at that and saying like, well, I can buy like 2 or 3 Sol. And maybe if it gets as big as Ethereum, because Solana's an Ethereum competitor, maybe I'll like 10x my money, right? Or 20x my money. And again, like that's not a realistic target, but this is what an average retail investor who doesn't know much about crypto, who's coming into crypto looking to hedge themselves against the financial system, this is the mindset they're going to have, right? I have a few $100s. I'm trying to hedge myself. I'm trying to make some gains. Which crypto here makes the most sense to me? Solana, out of these like top ones, is going to be, let's say, roughly on par, you could say, like with something like XRP, right? I would make the argument that it's going to be a little bit better for the simple reason that Solana has a lot more catalysts that would bring more attention and more investors into it, like PayPal, like working with Solana on PYUSD. Of course, Solana is also doing like tokenized stocks with Kraken, and I'm sure it'll be doing that with other institutions. So there's a lot more, stuff that could get Solana into the headlines. There's also the also the Solana ETFs, also the strategic altcoin reserve that will include Sol and all this stuff, right? So Solana seems to have way more announcements that could bring attention to it versus compared to something like XRP. And of course, because Solana has a smaller market cap, it'll have an easier time pumping compared to XRP as new inflows come in. Because again, what determines a crypto's potential, for those who don't know, is not a crypto's price tag, but it's a market cap. So people will see Solana rallying a little bit more. They'll have a couple $100s to invest, and they'll say, well, this Solana thing's going up way more than like what anything else that's above it. So I'm going to go, throw in some money into Sol. Again, I'm not saying that that'll happen, but I'm just kind of giving an explanation. Again, you have to think like an ape for some of these things, right? Anyways, I guess that's a good transition here to Dogecoin. Same idea. People be like, oh yeah, I remember Dogecoin. It's affiliated with Elon Musk, right? And I'm sure that they'll all remember when, X Money, this payments platform on X, it'll probably launch sometime over the summer. I'm sure that will attract a lot of attention to basically to Dogecoin, because Dogecoin could potentially be included there. Of course, Elon is also now moving back into Tesla, and like Tesla is pumping. And of course, when people think Tesla, and when Tesla starts like announcing potentially some crypto stuff as well, maybe that'll be related to Dogecoin. Maybe they'll even announce like a Dogecoin treasury strategy, which I don't think so, but you never know. Again, there's a lot of, I guess the key point being in this case is that there's a lot of potential things that could happen that would bring a lot more attention to Dogecoin, similarly like to kind of like Solana. So Doge could potentially see a decent amount of inflows. Moving on to Cardano, similar idea. I would say it's more akin to like XRP in the sense that there's a lot of ADA holders who bought in previous cycles, and they're waiting to break even, right? And so when new buyers come in, like a lot of them are kind of not desperate, but like itching to kind of like, sell at break even or whatever. There aren't as many catalysts for Cardano that would, put it in the spotlight. There's really just the ETFs. And again, feel free to disagree in the comments. I'm talking off the cuff here. Like I could potentially do like a whole video on each of these cryptos, and maybe I will at some point, but I'm just quickly going down the list and saying, again, compared to something like Solana, even compared to something like Dogecoin, Cardano doesn't seem to have as many catalysts that would put it in the spotlight and bring in new investors, because it really just has, potentially the strategic altcoin reserve as well as the spot ETF approvals. But besides that, there isn't really much, right? So now, guys, moving on to Tron. Same idea. Like in Tron's case, it's a little bit tricky because, of course, Trump has been buying some TRX via World Liberty Financial. And I guess this is a good kind of reminder to you guys that, World Liberty Financial buying all these altcoins like Link and Aave and ENA and Say and all these other cryptos, like, people like they heard about it initially and they're like, wow, like it's a nothing burger. It's not going to have any impact. But trust me, when the attention really starts turning to crypto, and again, retail investors start looking at like, what am I going to buy with my small bag of a few hundred, maybe $1,000? They're going to hear about the fact that, wait a minute, Trump has been buying like Link and Aave and ENA and all these other cryptos and Say, like those look awesome. I want to buy those too, right? Or, Donald Trump's son holds SUI, like stuff like that. But anyway, in terms of Tron, again, a little bit trickier. It's not as accessible to US investors. If people search like what is Tron, they'll read about like Justin Sun and get maybe a little bit sketched out, right? Like stuff like that. So again, not necessarily super bullish on Tron. And then of course the last one I'll end on here with is SUI, which of course also has the spot ETF potentially is held by Donald Trump's son. There's rumors that SUI could be partnering with Pokemon. If that rumor comes true, then imagine all the attention, all the new investment that will attract to SUI. I think it would be quite substantial and it would do quite well. And again, you could keep going down the list here with like Hyperliquid, which I personally don't think will do too well. It'll be more driven by fundamentals, which we'll have to see how those go. But I don't think most retail investors understand what a perpetual decentralized exchange is. Hyperliquid is not very accessible, and I don't think you're going to see it listed on many centralized exchanges because centralized exchanges don't want that. They don't want to promote their competition. Same reason that you don't see BNB listed on a lot of like other exchanges, right? We can keep moving down the list here, but you kind of get the idea by this point. Is like, again, you have to look at the crypto market through the lens of someone who's like, they heard about crypto now in the news. It's everywhere because the bond market is blowing up and everyone is piling into Bitcoin and piling into crypto. And you're saying, okay, what am I going to buy? What am I going to buy? And you have a few $100s, a couple $1,000s max. And you're going down the list and saying like, which one of these things do I feel like is going to give me a big return? And at the same time, I guess from more perspective of an analyst, you have to think how many catalysts are upcoming for these cryptos that would bring more attention and new investors into the project. Again, I think that there's quite a few of those for Solana. I think there's probably going to be quite a few of those for Doge. I think there's going to be quite a few of those for SUI, for XRP, for Cardano, for Tron. I'm not so sure, right? And again, feel free to disagree in the comments, but I'm just giving you again like a very high level overview of kind of why and how like these altcoins are going to pump. And of course, by this stage, you're probably wondering, okay, but then how are these smaller cap altcoins going to get found? How are they going to go up like 50 to 100x or whatever? We will discuss that in tomorrow's video. So I'll just leave it at that for today. And all I will do is say, if you're interested in this type of analysis, this is the type of stuff I do in the Coin Bureau Club every single day. That's where we do deep dives into small cap and mid cap altcoins every single week. We allow our members to vote on which altcoins we review. The altcoins we add to those polls is based on a combination of our research as well as suggestions from our members. We have a research feed where I'm sharing these types of insights every single day, a team portfolio page where you can see our full crypto portfolios. I'll be showcasing mine this Saturday so stay tuned for that. And of course, we have an exclusive deals page where you can find discounts on like crypto analytics platforms, and of course, a members Discord where you can ask us questions and discuss all the stuff everything under the sun. Main channel, Coin Bureau Trading. Aaron is in there as well. So if you want to ask him questions, don't bother him too much though. He's a busy guy. But anyways, if you did make it this far, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, ping that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.